The basketball thumped against the driveway as Ethan Reeves perfected his dribbling routine. It was a breezy afternoon in his quiet neighborhood, with the distant hum of lawnmowers and the occasional chirp of birds filling the air. His house, a small two-story home with a bright red door, stood at the edge of a cul-de-sac lined with maple trees. Ethan adjusted his stance and aimed for the hoop above the garage. He'd been practicing for over an hour, determined to make the school team next year. The ball sailed through the air and bounced off the rim, rolling across the driveway toward the street. As Ethan jogged after the ball, a strange feeling crawled up his spine. He stopped mid-step, gripping the basketball, and glanced toward the sidewalk across the street. That's when he saw her, a girl standing beneath the shade of a maple tree. She wasn't moving, just watching. Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd imagined it. She looked about his age, maybe 12 or 13, with dark curls tied in a ponytail and wearing an oversized hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. Her face was partially hidden in the shadows, but her stillness unnerved him. Ethan frowned and called out, "Hey, can I help you?" The girl didn't respond. She shifted slightly, stepping back behind the tree, almost like she didn't want to be seen. Weird, Ethan thought, but decided to let it go. People passed by the neighborhood all the time. Maybe she was lost or waiting for someone. He shrugged, returned to his basketball, and took another shot. This time, it swished perfectly through the net. But when he turned to check, she was still there. That night, as Ethan sat at the dinner table with his mom and dad, the image of the girl lingered in his mind. His mom, Lila Reeves, was busy serving spaghetti while his dad, James, shuffled through a pile of work papers on the counter. "Everything okay, Bud?" his dad asked, noticing Ethan's silence. Ethan hesitated, twirling spaghetti on his fork. "Yeah, just there was this girl outside today. She was just standing across the street. Kinda creepy." "A girl?" Lila asked, setting down the serving spoon. "Did you talk to her?" "Not really. I asked if she needed help, but she didn't say anything. She just kept watching." His dad frowned and set his papers aside. "Do you think she was lost? Should we let someone know?" Ethan shook his head. "She didn't seem lost. Just weird." "Well," Lila said gently, "if you see her again, maybe try talking to her. She might be shy, or if she looks like she's in trouble, let us know." Ethan nodded, but the thought of approaching her again made him uneasy. The next day, Ethan decided to walk to the park after finishing his homework. With his basketball tucked under one arm, he strolled toward the small playground a few blocks from his house. The park was a familiar, comforting place, wide green fields, a set of swings, and a basketball court where kids from the neighborhood often gathered to play. As he neared the court, Ethan froze. There she was again, the girl. This time, she was sitting on a bench near the swings, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her hoodie looked even more oversized today, practically swallowing her frame. Ethan clutched his basketball tightly and approached cautiously. His heart thudded in his chest as he debated what to say. Why did she keep showing up wherever he was? Was it a coincidence? "Hey," he called out when he was a few steps away. "Are you following me or something?" The girl's head snapped up, her wide brown eyes locking on his. For a moment, she looked terrified, like she might run, but then she stayed put, her lips pressing into a thin line. Ethan sighed and lowered his basketball. "Look, I'm not going to do anything. But you keep showing up. What's the deal?" The girl hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not following you." "Really? Because it kind of feels like you are." Ethan gestured toward the court. "This is, like, the second time I've seen you. Do you even live around here?" The girl bit her lip, glancing away. "Not really." Ethan tilted his head, confused. "Then why are you here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she stood up abruptly, her hands disappearing into the pocket of her hoodie. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her steps quick and uneven. "Hey, wait," Ethan called after her, but she didn't stop. Within seconds, she disappeared down the gravel path that led out of the park. Ethan stared after her, a mixture of frustration and curiosity bubbling in his chest. Something about her didn't add up, but he couldn't figure out what. Over the next week, Ethan started seeing her everywhere, outside the grocery store, near the school playground, even on his street again. Every time, she'd linger just long enough to catch his attention before slipping away. Okay, this is officially weird, Ethan muttered to himself one afternoon as he spotted her near the park again. This time, he was determined to get answers. He jogged across the grass, his basketball forgotten, and approached her with purpose. All right, this has gone on long enough, he said, stopping a few feet away. What's your deal? Why do you keep hanging around? The girl flinched at his tone, but didn't run. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and something else. Sadness? She hesitated, then blurted out, I was trying to find you. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. What? I mean your family, she stammered, her voice trembling. I wasn't sure if it was really you. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? Why are you looking for my family? The girl took a shaky breath, her hands fidgeting in her hoodie pocket. Because my dad said I should, before he died. Her words hit Ethan like a freight train, leaving him speechless. For the first time, he noticed how thin she looked, how her oversized hoodie seemed to hang off her small frame. He felt a strange twist in his chest, a mix of pity and confusion. What do you mean? He finally managed to ask. The girl looked down, her voice barely audible. Your dad. He used to work with my dad. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should find you. He said your family would help me. Ethan's heart sank as her words began to sink in. He didn't know what to say. Ethan stood frozen, processing the girl's words. She looked fragile, like a strong breeze might knock her over, and her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. My dad worked with your dad, she said again, her voice shaky. He said your family would keep me safe if something happened to him. Ethan's mind raced. His dad was a retired police officer, but Ethan had never heard him mention anything about this girl or her dad. Still, there was something in her voice, a desperation that made him believe her. He swallowed hard and asked, What happened to your dad? Her lips trembled, and for a moment, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. But then she whispered, He died 6 months ago. Ethan's heart sank. He wanted to ask how or why, but the pain in her eyes stopped him. What's your name? He asked instead, his voice softer now. Nia, she said. Nia Carter. I'm Ethan, he said. Let me take you to my house. My parents will know what to do. Nia hesitated, her eyes darting toward the park's exit. What if they don't remember my dad? What if they don't want to help? Ethan shook his head firmly. My parents aren't like that. If my dad made a promise to your dad, he'll keep it. I promise. After a long pause, Nia nodded. Ethan gestured for her to follow him, and together, they walked the few blocks to his house. When they arrived, Ethan held the door open for Nia. She stepped inside hesitantly, her eyes darting around the cozy living room. The smell of fresh-baked cookies wafted from the kitchen, where Ethan's mom, Lila, was humming to herself as she cleaned. Mom! Ethan called out, his voice laced with urgency. Lila turned, her warm smile fading when she saw Nia standing behind Ethan. Oh, she said, setting down a dish towel. Who's this? This is Nia, Ethan said quickly. She needs our help? Lila's brow furrowed in concern. She stepped closer, her gaze softening as she took in Nia's small frame and tired eyes. Hello, Nia, she said gently. Are you okay? Sweetheart? Before Nia could answer, Ethan blurted. Mom, she said her dad used to work with Dad. She said he told her to find us if something ever happened to him. Lila's expression shifted to one of shock, and then recognition. Your dad, she murmured. You mean Marcus Carter? Nia nodded, clutching the hem of her hoodie. Yes, he told me to find the Reeves family. He said you'd help me. Lila's hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears. Oh, Marcus, she whispered. She turned to Ethan. Your dad talked about Marcus all the time. They were partners years ago. Where's Dad? Ethan asked. We need to tell him. He's in the garage, Lila said, already moving toward the door. Stay here. Ethan, make Nia comfortable. Ethan guided Nia to the couch. She sat stiffly, her eyes scanning the room as if she didn't believe she was safe yet. "You want some water or something?" Ethan offered. Nia shook her head. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her pale face and trembling hands suggested otherwise. A moment later, Ethan's dad, James, entered the living room. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, his gray hair combed neatly back. His eyes, usually calm and steady, widened when he saw Nia. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice thick. "You're Marcus Carter's daughter?" "Yes, sir," Nia said, her voice barely audible. James sank into a chair, rubbing his hands over his face. "Marcus," he said softly. "He was the best partner I ever had. We went through so much together. When he told me about you, I promised him I'd always be there for you, no matter what." He looked up, his eyes locking onto Nia's. "I failed him, didn't I?" Nia shook her head quickly. "No, you didn't know. I didn't come sooner because I wasn't sure if I could trust anyone." James's jaw tightened. "What happened to you after Marcus?" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Nia hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. "After he died, I stayed with some of his cousins for a while, but they didn't really want me. They just took me in because they felt like they had to. Then I went into foster care. It wasn't bad at first, but," her voice cracked, "it got worse. I've been in 3 homes in the last 6 months. Nobody wants to keep me." Lila gasped softly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, honey," she said, moving to sit beside Nia. "I'm so sorry." Nia looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought, maybe if I found you, things would be different." James stood, his expression fierce. "You did the right thing. Nia, you belong here. Marcus trusted us, and we're not going to let him down." That night, the Reeves family set up the guest room for Nia. Lila brought out fresh sheets and a warm blanket, while Ethan helped her carry a small dresser into the room. "Are you sure this is okay?" Nia asked, standing in the doorway as they worked. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Lila said firmly. "This is your home now, for as long as you need it." After the room was ready, Nia sat on the edge of the bed, running her fingers over the soft quilt. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching her. "See," he said with a small smile. "Told you my parents would help." Nia looked up at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan, for everything." Ethan shrugged, though his cheeks turned pink. "That's what family's for." Over the next few days, Nia began to adjust to life with the Reeves family. At first, she was quiet and reserved, unsure of her place in the house. She kept her belongings packed in her small duffel bag, as if she were preparing to leave at any moment. But slowly, the warmth and kindness of the Reeves family began to ease her fears. Lila made sure Nia felt included in their daily routines. She taught Nia how to bake cookies one afternoon, smiling as Nia tentatively rolled dough into uneven shapes. "It doesn't have to be perfect," Lila said. "The best cookies are the ones made with love." Ethan introduced Nia to his favorite video games, handing her a controller and explaining the rules with exaggerated patience. At first, Nia struggled to keep up, but soon her competitive streak emerged. By the end of the evening, she was celebrating a hard-won victory while Ethan laughed in disbelief. "Beginner's luck," he grumbled, though his grin betrayed him. James took a quieter approach, offering Nia small reassurances through his actions. He left her a plate of pancakes on the counter when she woke up late one morning and made sure her bicycle, a gift from the neighbors, was in perfect working order. When Nia thanked him shyly, he simply patted her shoulder and said, "You're part of the family now. That's what we do." Nia's first day at her new school was nerve-wracking. She had been moved around so many times that she didn't bother learning anyone's names anymore. But Ethan insisted on walking her to class, introducing her to his friends along the way. "This is Nia," Ethan said proudly, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "She's my sister now." Nia felt a surge of warmth at his words, even as nervous butterflies fluttered in her stomach. Ethan's friends greeted her warmly, making her feel welcome in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. By the end of the day, she had made her first friend, a girl named Mia, who shared her love of fantasy books. That evening, Nia sat at the kitchen table with Ethan, working on her homework. She struggled with some of the math problems, but Ethan patiently walked her through each one. "You're really good at this," she said, watching him explain a tricky equation. "Nah," he said with a shrug. "I just had a good teacher. Dad always helped me with this stuff when I was little." "Your dad is amazing," Nia said softly, glancing toward the living room where James was reading the newspaper. I wish I'd had more time with mine." Ethan put down his pencil and looked at her. "I didn't know your dad, but if he was anything like you, he must have been amazing too." Nia smiled, her chest tightening with a mix of sadness and gratitude. For the first time, she felt like she had a real chance at belonging. Just as Nia was starting to settle in, the family received unexpected news. James answered the door one afternoon to find a stern-looking woman holding a clipboard. "Mr. Reeves," she said, introducing herself as Diane from Child Protective Services. "We've received a report about Nia Carter. There are concerns about her placement here." James frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. "Concerns? What concerns?" Diane glanced down at her clipboard. "There's been a claim from a distant relative, a woman named Gloria Davis. She's alleging that Nia belongs with her as the next of kin. She's requesting custody." James's jaw tightened. "Gloria Davis? She hasn't been involved in Nia's life at all. Why would she want custody now?" Diane sighed. "These situations are always complicated. We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation to determine what's in Nia's best interest." When James relayed the news to Lila and Ethan, they were shocked. Nia, overhearing the conversation from the hallway, froze in place. The idea of being taken away from the Reeves family filled her with dread. "I'm not going," she said, her voice trembling. "She doesn't care about me. She just wants the money from my dad's benefits." Lila knelt beside Nia, wrapping her in a warm hug. "We're not going to let that happen. Sweetheart, you're safe with us, and we're going to fight for you." James contacted a lawyer the next morning, determined to protect Nia. He spent hours gathering evidence, from school records showing her academic improvement to letters from neighbors and teachers attesting to her positive impact on the community. Ethan decided to help in his own way. He went door to door with a petition, asking the community to support Nia's case. Many of the neighbors signed eagerly, sharing stories about how kind and helpful Nia had been since she arrived. "She helped me carry groceries last week," Mrs. Jenkins said, her voice quivering with emotion. "She's a sweet girl. She belongs here." Even Ethan's friends pitched in, writing letters about how Nia had become an important part of their group. "She's like a sister to all of us," one letter read. "She's kind, smart, and brave. Please let her stay." The outpouring of support gave the Reeves family hope, but they knew the fight was far from over. The first court hearing was tense. Gloria Davis, a stern-looking woman with sharp features, argued that she was Nia's rightful guardian as her closest living relative. She claimed that the Reeves family had no legal right to keep her. James stood up, his voice steady and full of conviction. "With all due respect, Your Honor, Gloria Davis hasn't been a part of Nia's life. My family has provided her with a stable, loving home. We've kept the promise I made to her father, Marcus Carter." The judge listened carefully, requesting additional evidence before making a decision. The next hearing was scheduled for a month later, giving both sides time to prepare. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, the Reeves family received overwhelming support from the community. Teachers, neighbors, and even local business owners wrote letters and signed petitions on Nia's behalf. Ethan's soccer coach submitted a letter describing how Nia had become a regular fixture at their games, cheering on the team and helping organize halftime snacks. The librarian shared how Nia had joined a reading program and inspired younger children to fall in love with books. On the day of the final hearing, the courtroom was packed with supporters. Gloria Davis's argument focused on her legal rights as a blood relative. But James and Lila presented a compelling case for Nia's emotional well-being and her deep ties to their family and community. When Nia was called to the stand, she spoke with a quiet strength that brought tears to many eyes. "The Reeves family is my family," she said. "They made me feel safe when no one else did. They kept the promise my dad made to me. Please don't take me away from them." The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the mountain of evidence presented by the Reeves family and their community. Letters, testimonials, and even photographs painted a clear picture of the love and stability Nia had found with the Reeves family. Gloria Davis sat across the room, her expression unreadable, as the judge adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "This case has presented a difficult decision," the judge began, his voice measured. "While biological ties are important, the court's primary consideration must always be the best interests of the child." James held Lila's hand tightly, his knuckles white with tension. Ethan sat beside them, fidgeting nervously, while Nia clasped her hands together in her lap, her heart pounding in her chest. "The evidence presented here today demonstrates that Nia has flourished in the care of the Reeves family," the judge continued. "She has not only found stability, but has also thrived academically, socially, and emotionally under their care. The community's support further underscores the positive impact this family has had on her well-being." He paused, looking directly at Nia. "Nia, your voice in this matter is important. You've shown courage and maturity beyond your years. It is clear to this court that you have found a home where you feel safe and loved." The judge turned to Gloria Davis, his tone firm but not unkind. "While I acknowledge the biological connection, it is apparent that Ms. Davis has not been actively involved in Nia's life. Custody is not simply a matter of blood relations. It's about what will best serve the child's future." James leaned forward, hardly daring to breathe, as the judge delivered his final decision. "Therefore, I hereby rule that full legal custody of Nia Carter be granted to James and Lila Reeves. This court believes that they are best equipped to provide Nia with the stable and loving environment she deserves." The gavel struck the wooden block, signaling the end of the hearing. Nia let out a shaky breath, her eyes wide with disbelief. Lila pulled her into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "You're staying with us, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're home." Ethan whooped loudly, earning a reprimanding glance from the judge. But he didn't care. He wrapped his arms around Nia and his mom, his grin stretching ear to ear. James sat back in his chair, his eyes closed briefly in relief, before reaching out to pull his family into a hug. Across the room, Gloria Davis stood, her expression a mix of frustration and resignation. She nodded curtly to her lawyer and left the courtroom without another word. The ride home from the courthouse was filled with laughter and tears of joy. Nia sat between James and Lila in the front seat, while Ethan leaned forward from the back, excitedly making plans. "We have to celebrate tonight," Ethan declared. "Pizza and ice cream, and we can watch that movie you love." Nia smiled, her cheeks still damp from tears. "That sounds perfect," she said softly. When they arrived home, the Reeves family found their front yard filled with neighbors holding handmade signs and balloons. The entire community had come together to welcome Nia home. "Surprise!" Mrs. Jenkins called out, waving a plate of cookies in the air. "We knew you'd win." Nia's eyes widened as she stepped out of the car. She had never seen anything like it. The neighbors cheered as she approached, clapping and offering warm words of congratulations. Mrs. Chun handed her a bouquet of flowers, and Mr. Martinez patted her on the shoulder, beaming with pride. "Welcome home, Nia," he said. "We're all so proud of you." Tears threatened to spill again as Nia looked around at all the smiling faces. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged, not just with the Reeves family, but within an entire community that cared about her. Over the next few months, life settled into a comfortable rhythm for Nia. She decorated her room in shades of lavender, her favorite color, with fairy lights strung across the walls and a bookshelf filled with her growing collection of fantasy novels. At school, she continued to excel, earning top grades and even joining the student council. She started a mentorship program for younger students who were struggling, using her own experiences to inspire and guide them. Ethan, true to his word, became the best big brother she could have asked for. They spent weekends biking around the neighborhood, playing video games, and working on school projects together. He even convinced her to join his soccer team, where she quickly became a valuable player. James and Lila continued to shower Nia with love and support. Lila taught her how to cook more complex dishes, and Nia proudly made dinner for the family one evening, a spaghetti recipe she had perfected with Lila's help. James, meanwhile, helped her build a birdhouse for the backyard, teaching her how to use tools and sharing stories about her father as they worked. "Your dad would be so proud of you," James said one evening as they admired the finished birdhouse. "He knew you were special." And he was right. As Nia grew more confident in her new life, she found ways to give back to the community that had supported her. She organized a fundraiser at school to provide supplies for foster children, raising enough money to donate backpacks filled with essentials to local shelters. She also started volunteering at the library, helping younger kids with their reading. Mrs. Thompson, the librarian, often praised Nia for her patience and encouragement. "You have a gift for making people feel seen and valued," she told her one day. At home, the Reeves family began hosting weekly dinners for foster families in the community, creating a space where children and parents could connect and share their experiences. Nia became the heart of these gatherings, offering a listening ear and words of encouragement to kids who were going through the same struggles she had faced. Years later, as Nia prepared to graduate from high school, she reflected on how far she had come. Standing in her cap and gown, she glanced at the audience and saw James, Lila, and Ethan sitting in the front row, their faces filled with pride. When her name was called, she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew she wouldn't be where she was today without the Reeves family's unwavering love and support. After the ceremony, the family gathered for a celebratory dinner. Nia raised her glass, her voice steady and full of emotion. "To my family," she said, her eyes meeting each of theirs. "Thank you for choosing me, for fighting for me, and for showing me what love really means. I love you all." James raised his glass in return, his voice thick with emotion. "To Nia, you've brought more joy and love into our lives than we ever thought possible. We're so proud of you." As they clinked glasses and shared laughter, Nia felt a deep sense of peace. She was no longer the scared little girl who had shown up on their doorstep. She was Nia Reeves, a daughter, a sister, and a part of a family that would love her forever.